All right, good morning, friends. Time for the hands-free drive to work. You know, we designed this so that while you steer yourself from home to work, you can ultimately steer yourself better once you get there. We know we're busy, so this is just kind of something we can listen to on the fly. And so I really, today's a little different. I have a question for you. And this is why a lot of times I actually put this out to the people that I lead in my businesses. But, today I'm asking you, Facebook, I'd like some advice. When I wrote Last to Least, A New Direction for Winning and Working Life, when I wrote the book, a lot of people said, man, you should make this a Christian book because they know I'm a Christian guy. And so I thought about that, of course, but, I really didn't want to go in that direction. I wanted to leave it just practical wisdom. How do we make our next wise move? Really, that's what Last to Least is about, no matter which faith you come from or which worldview that you come from. But really what I wanted to ask is, would it be helpful if I created a resource that people of faith could take alongside Last to Least? And really it be kind of a manual, maybe it be like a Bible study, but ultimately how we could work according to Last to Least, and then how we could share our faith publicly as we work in that way. So I wondered if that would be helpful. That's my question, and I'll keep on explaining it just a little bit. But Last to Least is really the opposite of worst to first. Robert Bellah, in his groundbreaking book, Habits of the Heart, says that most of us work from a utilitarian, individualistic perspective. That means we see work as a way for us to climb the ladder and get higher in society. Or we see it from an expressive individualism perspective. That's how we see our work. And that's how that we can find ourselves and discover ourselves through our work. And Last to Least is really the opposite of both of those. Both of those are saying, how do I make work about me finding myself? Or how do I make work about me climbing the ladder? And again, those are really cool parts of work, but Last to Least says the real purpose of work is not either one of those things. Last to Least says the real purpose of work is so that I can actually serve the individuals and communities that my work was created to serve. And so really what I'm thinking is, I'll give you a quick example of how I would use maybe this extra resource, not Last to Least itself, but this extra resource to come alongside it to help you share your faith publicly using Last to Least. Really think about the concept itself. The concept itself, if you ask me, it's self-evident. You cannot find out who you really are through your work until you meet a need. Nobody pays for your work. Nobody accepts your work until you actually meet their needs. So need meeting necessarily comes before any profits or incentives, including finding myself, that comes back to me. And so if I learn to work that way, I don't go around that met need to try to get what I need. What I do, I learn to meet that need first. That becomes the purpose of my work. It completely changes the way I steer myself through a day. It completely changes what I see as my next wise move. So if I work in that way and Last to Least, watch how this has happened. This has happened to me many times. I've been able to use this concept to also share my faith publicly. And really, I saw a problem before I decided how to do this, and I'll tell you a little story about how I've done it before. But I saw a problem a lot of times with work. What we do, we separate faith and work. And so we'll say, yes, I'm a person of faith, and yes, I work hard, and we never find out how to marry the two. One time I was sitting with a guy, he and I were talking about an annuity that he was considering purchasing. And he was going to put some money into an annuity or a CD or the market. He was kind of deciding to try to, where do I put this money? How do I do it? And the conversation turned a little bit to a little bit deeper things. We started talking about the Lord. And, I remember he took his paper and he folded them up and he set them over to the side. And he said, hey, let's talk about this later. What we're talking about is much more important than this. See, he didn't see that as a part of the conversation about the Lord. And when I realized that a lot of people do this, I'm like, man, really, if God created the world, then he is in the conversation of every piece of it. Where I spend my money, how I spend my money, if I save it, if I give it, if I invest it, all those things should be under that realm if he really created us, as believers in Jesus believe. So this is one way. When I saw that problem, I'm like, okay, how do we actually integrate that instead of, seeing it as two separate worlds? And so when I started working Last Lease, I realized it's obvious that need meeting has to come before any profit or incentive that comes back to me, including expressing myself individually or climbing a corporate ladder or climbing the social status ladder. A met need has to come before it. When I realized that, what I started to be able to see is when I talk to people about that, it is a very natural thing to talk about Philippians 2. Philippians 2 just says that we should look out for the interest of others over the interest of ourselves. We should look out for the interest of others over the interest in ourselves. And Paul the Apostle, when he wrote that, he says, have this mindset in you, this looking out for others' needs mindset, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, and then he gives the example that all believers should follow when they're looking to the interest of others before the interest of their own needs. He says, look to the example of Christ, who, though he was in the very form of God, didn't consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he humbled himself and became a servant, becoming obedient to a death, even death on a cross. And he says, because of this, God has now lifted him up, that he's given him the name above every name, that the name of Jesus, every knee bows and every tongue confesses that he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And so that's a very, when you think about that, watch that connection. It's like, we should look at the interest of others. We should meet the needs of others before we worry about how profits and incentives come back to us. It's just in time. We should meet needs and then look for profits, not just look for profits and then we actually miss the need, and in doing so we miss the profits as well. See how that works? It's very logical. But in doing that now, it's a very natural progression to say, in my faith, it's the exact same way. I actually learned this from my faith, that it seems like that God should come and take over the world because it's his and he owns it, and it's his and he deserves it. But what he did actually is became a servant. He didn't look to his own interest. He didn't stay in the perfection of heaven. He actually came and served us. He humbled himself. He became, our servant. Does that mean that there's no profits or incentives? No. Another author in Hebrews says, that it was for the joy set before him that Jesus endured the cross. So there was the profit or incentive that came about, but what actually happened was he didn't look for the profit incentive first. He looked to meet the need, and that's what we do with our work. And you see how all that just kind of, boom, it fits right together. I'm not saying, hey, before we continue to talk about our work and how we meet needs before profits or incentives, let's take a little side note and talk about, our faith. No, it's absolutely integrated. And really, if you have a biblical faith, every inch of it is integrated. There's nothing in life that is secular, Martin Luther said. So here's my question once again. Would this help you if I was able to create a resource that kind of clicked with Last to Least, helping us work, helping us steer ourselves through our work, but then also giving you a way to share your faith as you do that? That's my question for you on the Hands-Free Drive to Work this morning.